Welcome to the HBTVS podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Final Destination, the 2000 supernatural horror film. I guess that's really a horror film. It's more of a Rube Goldbergian gore movie.
I mean, it's
less so than the sequels.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's you watch this movie the same reson why you watch.
They show it. They show it in Halloween. Yeah. So we'll be discussing the first movie in the series, and we'll discuss some of the other stuff from the series. But we're focusing on the first film, the one that starred Devon Sawa and Ali Larter, Sean William Scott.
I forgot he was in it.
Yeah, Stifler. It was an interesting period of time. So, you know, these movies are kind of relatively hard to spoil. Something happens at the beginning. One of the characters sees it's going to happen. They cause themselves and a few others to not be involved in it, and this freak accident kills a bunch of people that doesn't include them, and then death comes after them again.
If somebody's listening to this, they've had to have seen it because there's no way they would listen to this probably without seeing it. So I think full spoilers.
Yeah, full spoilers. It's on Netflix.
I had never seen it. I don't know why. I just think I missed it in theaters, but also I don't know, something about it just didn't interest me that much. I don't know if it felt like a paranoia porn, like, just going to make me paranoid of everything. You know what I mean? Getting on an airplane and all this stuff. For some reason, I just missed this one and then didn't see the sequels. And then,
what's funny
this whole
is
franchise passed me by.
There's stuff in these movies. So I don't remember how many of these I saw in theaters, if any, but I definitely remember seeing at least the first three. I'd seen, I think, the fourth one at some point, or the NASCAR one, but like I remember seeing these movies over time, but stuff like set pieces from the movie stuck out to me. Because in the second film, there's something that happens with the ladder, like the one that's in an apartment where it's like it slides down from like the walkway or whatever. And then whenever I would walk in downtown and there's one of those ladders above the street, I always like walk around it. And then I know I've seen memes about where you see a truck that has all the lumber on it on the expressway and everybody's on the other lane away from it. And it's like, I guess everybody's seen Final Destination too.
Well, you know, one day we all live in Louisville and I live in the South, and I was coming down Dixie Highway and there was one of those log trucks pulled over on the side of the road with a strap that had broke.
Yeah.
So he put a new ratchet strap on. I was like, nope.
Yeah. So there's all these things that stick out from that. And I think those movies got a huge amount of play. So when they came out in theaters, they all, you know, I think the second was the lowest grossing, but they all made decent money. They all made decent international and domestic money, and especially that was in the era when DVDs sold. So I think the Final Destination did good business on video and on cable, because I remember seeing it on cable a bunch.
I think pretty much everyone I watched was rented or on FX, because FX used to show the crap out of them.
And then I think it's always funny is like these movies, I forget where I saw them, but I probably just rented them if I hadn't seen them in theaters. But you were talking about the first film, so this was in 2000. The movie initially started off as a spec script for The X-Files by a writer, Jeffrey Riddick, and he actually made a short film we saw at Fright Night in 2014 that had Rainn Wilson in it.
Yes. Okay. I was wondering the connection there. I couldn't remember if he was like in part 4. I don't know why I was thinking part 4. So the writer of this was the one that made that short film?
Yeah, so he had written it as a spec script. So I think when he was trying to get representation back then in the 90s, a big thing was to write a spec script for a popular TV series. It didn't mean that was going to go to the showrunners and that was going to be a part of the show. It was just showing that you could walk in, pick up an existing universe, and write a successful entry in the movie. Or not in the movie, in the series. So you could, you know, write a spec Seinfeld script or whatever. It just showed that you could write for a successful series and make an entry that would fit in just fine with the rest of it. So it was a spec script for The X-Files. I think it was like Flight 180 or something. And
he was a very nice guy, by the way, too. He was cool. There was nobody there, so it was easy to talk to whoever.
Yeah. Well, because that Fright Night wasn't super well.
There was hardly nobody there, but he had his booth. He talked to us for a bit and screening and talked about the short and stuff.
It's one of those things they probably weren't all fully filled in on what the ticket sales numbers were before it started. But so it was a spec script for The X-Files, and then it got, you know, written into a feature. And then, ironically enough, then the people who are interested in making it into a film were Glenn Morgan and James Wong, who had worked on The X-Files and a lot of their big arcs and episodes and series. So they came in to rewrite it and to direct it, and then it got made. And so it's kind of funny with that going like full circle in that way, because it was directed by James Wong. And then James Wong and Glenn Morgan, so they were involved with this series. And then Glenn Morgan directed the Black Christmas remake from the mid-2000s.
With Ollie Larder, right? Wasn't she in that?
I don't remember. It's been a while since we watched that. I know that Mary Elizabeth Winstead was in it because I remember that. But then I think they also worked on Willard and some other movies, but the Crispin Glover one. But yeah, so Final Destination. So it started off as like an idea for the X-Files because it does make sense as an X-Files script.
Yeah,
like death is following somebody and like the character's paranoid.
Even there's the detectives in this that, you know what I mean?
That you could have definitely seen being Mulder and Scully and them being the focal point.
One's skeptical, one's not for a bit.
Yeah. Well, this to me feels just like an episode of X-Files or, what's the other show? They just rebooted it.
Twilight Zone?
Yeah, Twilight Zone. It feels very... Because there's actually a Twilight Zone episode that is very similar to this that has a woman having a premonition of an airplane crashing, and then she doesn't get on it, and then she does get on it, and then it crashed. So there's a whole lot of similarities on that, which is kind of interesting. I have not read about that on there, but...
Well, yeah, so, starting off this movie, we'll discuss spoilers throughout because, it's just people dying. Death comes after them. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think that this movie versus the later film, so this one was more about the concept than the execution of the individual kills. The later films became about the setup for the kills.
Yeah, this one's more interesting. Because like Tony Todd is what kind of describes him what's going on because he's a funeral director, and two of the guys break in to see their dead buddy. And then he tells them, we cheated death and blah blah blah, and then pretty much tells them
what is basically the premise? What does he say?
That when they had the premonition and they removed themselves from the situation, that they cheated death, and now that they have to die. Like once you can't cheat
unless
death.
You could figure out a way to learn death's design to cheat it again.
That's right. Okay.
So the movies have all had some variation on that at different points. So this movie starts out, they're going to go. There's a high school trip that they're going to go on a trip to France, and before the plane takes off, the character Alex, played by Devon Sawa, has the premonition that the plane's going to blow up. So that causes him and some of his friends, or him and his friend, and then some other classmates and a teacher to get kicked off the plane when he has kind of a freak out. And it's funny watching this because it came out in 2000, so this is pre-2011, pre-TSA check.
What I was thinking about the entire time, I'm like, would they have made this post 9/11 only because it's just like, man, we've thought about that a lot. Like this definitely seems like a film that flew right under the radar right before, Yeah,
now I could see them making it in this day and age now, maybe because
it would be made differently because Lost happened. But so the idea is the plane's going to blow up because of an accident, and he sees the premonition and gets off the plane. And then after the fact, so after they're mourning all the death of the classmates and stuff, then the survivors of the plane start dying in different ways after that fact, and it's trying to figure out how to stop it from happening. And then, like I said, so it's got Devon Sawa, it's got Allie Larder, and then Sean William Scott, Tony Todd, and then some of the other classmates, Amanda Detmer and Chad Janella and Kerr Smith. So there's just like other classmates. And this is back in the era when they would cast people to play high schoolers who definitely didn't look like high schoolers. It was like Devon Sawa to me looked like he could have possibly been a high schooler. Sean William Scott really didn't. I didn't really think he looked like a high schooler in American Pie, which came out the year before. And it was interesting because they kind of had him playing against type because, you had the Stifler character for Sean William Scott, which is like the kind of
he wasn't a type yet,
douche
really,
bro, where he's like, super masculine and jokey and frat bro and all this stuff. In this movie, he played kind of like a dweeb.
Yeah.
and I think that's why they had him covered.
Hitchcock.
Yeah, Billy Hitchcock. So that's why they had him covered up in like baggy clothes all the time, so you couldn't see he was actually muscular and probably wouldn't have been picked on or the weird kid that he played in the movie.
Riding his bike around at midnight. Everywhere.
Yeah, and then because was it Devon Sawa before that had been Idle Hands? Before that,
Jessica Alba. I liked that movie when I was younger.
Yeah, so you had
wasn't he in one other thing right around that era? I think I was looking his stuff up, and he I believe he had a string of things.
I know he's been doing all the fan conventions recently because he's been in other things. Let's see. So he was also in Casper.
That's what I'm thinking of. Casper, from a few years before that.
Yeah. But yeah, so in that film. Then Allie Larder had been in Varsity Blues, and in this one she wasn't playing the kind of ingenue really is more of just kind of the dark classmate who knew death because her parents died, or no, her dad died and her mom left. But it was definitely back in the era when you had people. I mean, they still do it today. I mean, we talk about the Spider-Man film. You have Tom Holland, who's in his early 20s playing high school. A lot of these people were 24 when the movie came out. So they probably been like, depending on when the movie shot to when it came out, like 22, 23, 24. So not too far off the mark. It's not as bad as when they have like 30-year-olds playing 16. But
I mean, it doesn't really bother me in this type of film. It's not like this is just
it wasn't about that.
Like, whatever.
It wasn't about realistic drama.
They could have also been in college. It could have been a college thing. It's like it just doesn't.
Yeah. So in the plane, after the plane blows up, pretty good effects. Not anything spectacular. I think they got much more elaborate in the sequels because they realized people really went there for these brutal, gory kills, as opposed to like this film. You had some setups with someone getting hung on a shower cable thing. You had someone getting like a knife stabbing them, or somebody getting their head chopped off, or things like that, or getting hit by a truck. So you had like moments that were shocking, maybe, but that weren't super brutal, gory in the way that some of the later movies would go on to do, or that other horror films have done.
Post Saw, Final Destination movies, probably.
Yeah, because Saw and like films like that.
Well, this and Saw are pretty, I feel like, comparable in the fact that the first movies are more concepts. And then
and really people show up to watch people die mostly.
Like the first movies have for the most part a solid concept.
I was gonna say it's the first film is the conceptual thing with the actually more star-studded cast on the lower budget in the first entry, and then the sequels ramp up the gore and stuff and have some different notable people sprinkled throughout. But it seems like like Saw in the first film had Cary Ells and Danny Glover, and I'm trying to remember, was there anybody else in there that was big?
When they're like somebody's famous guy's brother in it or something.
No, Donnie Wahlberger's in the sequels.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, yeah. So it seemed like they had like some of the bigger names in the first film versus the sequels. But when you go to like Final Destination, it's really doom porn. It's like, you're doomed to die. Yeah. And
for some reason, I guess that's why I was always just like, Same thing with Saw. Like I waited till Saw came out on DVD and rented that. And I was like, it was fine, but I never watched another one. And this, I just kind of skipped. I don't know. There's just something about it that felt like it has a one. It's a one objective, and it does it, and that's fine. But
it's a one-trick pony. Like, see, I feel like because you all graduated in 2004, I graduated in 2008. So like Saws were like the big movie you'd see when I was in high school because I think there's probably one that came out almost every year.
When did that come out? Was that 2003 or?
Saw came out, because there was like 6 or 7 came out my first year in college. So I feel like there was like maybe
Saw came out in 2004.
Okay, so the end of my college
and then
high school.
And then they hit like one movie a year for
because I remember
years.
seeing like almost until I was in college seeing a Saw movie every single year.
Yeah, because Saw 1 was 2004, 2 was 2005, 3 was 2006, 4 was 2007, 5 was 2008.
Like I said, I remember every year you'd go see one.
And then the final Saw 3D, the final chapter was 2010.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one.
And then they had the new one in the past couple of years.
Yeah. And then they also have a reboot coming out.
With what, Chris Rock and Samuel Jackson?
Yeah.
And then Darren Lynn Bousman's back to direct, who directed 2. And
but anyway, the only reason I'm comparing those is because I feel like this franchise, Final Destination, was probably a lot more popular when you were in high school, and then Saw came out, and at the end of the day,
well, there was only 2 when we were in high school.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
So it was just like,
but like both movies are just pretty much people dying in very elaborate ways. And the plot is really negligible. Like it's not like this one had a cool concept of them cheating death and trying to figure out ways around it. And then like in this later ones, they kind of get out of that. Like it's still there, but like again, it's just about somebody getting a log shoved through their face, and less about like how to not get the log shoved through your face.
The appeal probably is that for me, I think the appeal falls on something like. Sometimes people go see these films because they are afraid of death, and they're like, "Oh no," So a killer running around like Michael Myers, like people are afraid of that. But there takes some links to get to that situation where Michael Myers is in your house with a knife. Yeah. With this, the appeal is everything in normal everyday life is a threat, or can be a threat if they build it into the film and plant that scene in the back of your mind. So I think that's why this film has 5 sequels or whatever, and they're doing a reboot. You know, so I think, and that's what makes it original. Like from that era, it's like, you know, Scream, Final Destination, Saw, and then not including any remakes, but that's as far as I can think of off the top of my head of being like, okay, this is something that has a concept that's not just a teen slasher.
Yeah.
Because Scream was in 96, so I think that even though there may have been like an overlap with Scream 3 in this film, because when did Scream 3 come out? 2000?
I guess.
Even though there may have been overlap, I do feel like this was part of the kind of next generation kind of after.
Well, like this kind of reminds me of like, you know, and they're not the same at all.
I consider it the
so
same.
Scream 3 was 2000.
But you have like this, The Ring, and The Grudge.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
a lot of this stuff all kind of came out around the same time.
Because you had Scream, and then you had I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then all of the slashers of that
I consider
era.
Scream and all these in the same pool because Scream kind of relaunched the horror genre in some degree in the in the mid 90s. And I think this is all in the same boat because even though this came out in 2000, they were probably working on it since like 2 years after Scream came out.
Well,
2 or 3 years.
Well, if it was a spec script written in the 90s.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, like, so I think it's all the same boat or an effect of it.
I'm just kind of thinking of in terms of like the eras. So you had like the slasher boom that occurred again in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
So you had those films that were, once again, it's a mystery who the killer is. And a lot of those movies went lighter on the nudity and stuff than the 80s ones did, but they went heavier on the gore with better gore effects. And more on the whodunit and actually try to make you care and cast like recognizable faces to the teen audiences at the time. But it felt like with Final Destination was when you started to go like, oh, let's go supernatural, because then you had all the Japanese remakes like The Ring and The Grudge and all that stuff. And then you had the torture porn stuff like Saw that kicked off. And Hostel. So it felt like you had Scream kind of revitalized horror when it was kind of in a slagging period of just bad sequels and stuff that people weren't caring about, and revitalized the slasher, but it was only when they were good and when it had, you know, well-written stories and good acting and stuff. And then this movie was kind of like, oh, well, here's a supernatural twist. It's still kind of in the same wheelhouse and doesn't feel that different.
But it's gorier.
But it's the switch from a Michael Myers killer to because you also
Bar
had like
soap.
you had Halloween H2O.
Man.
So then you switch from that to death.
Well, it's funny
killer.
because like in this movie, a bar of soap is much more dangerous than Michael Myers could ever hope to be.
Well,
Mangle you up way worse.
One too, what I remember too is, you know, I guess part of it is a killer with a knife was only so scary as they were in the same room with you. But if death itself is coming for you and anything can create a series of events that lead to your death, there's not a lot you can do.
Yeah. The only issue I have with some of these movies is like, we were kind of talking about this pre-podcast, and this is an issue with every single movie ever made, is that like either the human body becomes either one, like they endure way more than you ever could, or it becomes the just weakest. It becomes Jello. It is the weakest, most susceptible thing ever to have existed, and I really hate that in a lot of these movies because like there's one of them in one of the multiple sequels about this, and like I'm a mechanic, and there's like one of the movies is like a car gets rear-ended and it shoots an engine. I think just the engine block out of it, and it hits their buddy in the head. And then they're all sitting like, oh, and then the engine kicks on and rips his head all to pieces. And it's like,
can't happen.
It can't happen because you took it from the field.
If death is doing it, Derek.
So it's like you get in this part in these movies where it's like, then there's
the whole situation of what these movies are. What would look the coolest? You know what I mean?
Well, then there's another one that I can't remember because like we talk about like Friday 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and a lot of these movies all blending together. And Final Destination's just like that because like you forget which
you meant the whole franchise blending together.
Like which one? Because now I rewatched the first one, and the second one, Megan Mullany is in it, and she gets in a wreck, and there's like a piece of PVC like sharpened pipe that's by her head, and the fire department's like trying to get the jaws of life to cut her out. So instead of getting the deathly like this death trap out of the car, they leave it and they hit it, and it causes her airbag to deploy and impels her through the head. And it's like, wait a minute, shouldn't all those guys like lose their job and get fired for not taking the like this pike out of the back of the seat for?
I think a lot of the movies. So this movie specifically, just about the first one, the 2000 film. So with
there's spoilers for this.
The storyline that this tries to set up is that, of course, after someone says the plane's going to blow up and they get thrown off the plane and then the plane blows up, they're going to investigate it. So you have the agents looking at him, but at the same time, like
They would
how
have
could
crucified him post 9/11.
yeah, post 9/11,
Especially if he would have not been a white guy,
and yelling the plane's gonna blow up, you would because like on Meet the Parents or whatever, he gets arrested because he says bomb on a plane. So and post 9/11, you couldn't really do that and not get sent to Guantanamo Bay, especially if you weren't a white American citizen born and raised here. But the agents are looking at him, but they can't really blame him because he would have had no access to that plane.
Plus, he's like a high school student.
And he's a high school student with no links to terrorist organizations or anything. And then other people start dying, and he always happens, since he's trying to stop it, he is in the vicinity of when it happens. I mean, like his one friend, Todd, looks like he committed suicide, but it was in reality he slipped and fell because of soap and water in the bathroom. So in that one, he shows up after it's happened, but there's really no way he could have been involved. And then with the teacher, he was there, and he leaves like a bloody footprint, and she dies by getting like a knife or whatever.
And her house blows up. You can't forget the house blows up.
Yeah, the house
she
blows
gets stabbed,
up.
and then the house just explodes.
Then the one classmate, when a number of everybody, for some reason, it's because they keep getting drawn to each other. So when they're at like a cafe or restaurant or something, they're all drawn there, and the one girl steps out into the street and gets hit by a bus immediately.
Which is just like the movie Brad Pitt where he gets hit by a car.
Yeah.
That's why as soon as I saw that. But in the Brad Pitt movie, he gets like hit between cars. And this
Which
doesn't
movie?
happen in that.
Meet Joe Black.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he's like bing, 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 bong.
But yeah, so you have.
Spoilers for Meet Joe Black.
So I think the
Meet Joe Young.
So I think the movie tried to vary it up a little bit. So you have the kind
that's
of
Joe Young's the gorilla movie.
so you have the kind of Rube Goldbergian death of his friend Todd in the bathroom with like stuff getting set up to then happen, and then you have the very sudden death that comes out of nowhere of the girl at the bus.
See, I think you get to a point, and I'm talking about like the effectiveness is that, hey, death is wherever you could die at any time. I think you can go in two directions. The more elaborate, the more unrealistic it can be, but maybe entertaining on some level. But I think the more realistic is maybe less dramatic and less entertaining, but maybe scarier. You know what I mean? Like you can go two different directions with these types of kills.
What I would like to see, the perfect movie to complement this is the opposite of Dale Tucker versus Evil.
Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah. Because like it is essentially a Final Destination-esque movie
For all the kids.
the kids because they die trying to kill them, and there's like scenes where they're trying to prevent it from happening and they still kill them.
Yes, yeah.
So like I was watching this movie last time, I'm like, you know what the best movie to watch after this is that, because it's pretty much a Final Destination
yeah,
movie,
that's true.
but just flipped because like they're trying to, because it's Rube Goldberg-esque things, and that's how they die. You know, like they jump over somebody, fall into a tree grinder or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, so you watch that and it's like, okay, so you go watch that and that's the fun version of this movie. Because like with these movies, I'm not a Final Destination fan. Like, when I was younger, I kind of liked them. But for me, it feels like this is a movie that's kind of a chore to get through.
Well,
I don't know if it's just because it's 2000.
As somebody who didn't watch them originally, for me, it's like this doesn't really hold much interest as far as like it being about teens. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, these teens aren't interesting. There's really no story here. They almost touch on survivor's guilt a little bit. Again, not what this film is about, but it is about these kills and for me, it's like, okay, this is a bit dated, and that's fine. I can deal with dated, but it's. It just doesn't really have much.
Well, I think the problem.
I don't feel like I missed out on not seeing it.
You did.
I probably would have enjoyed it way more then, but I'm not like, oh, why did I wait this long to see it? I probably waited a little too long, and then now I'm just like.
I think what you hit on earlier, which is would have been better movies, is less elaborate deaths, but more realistic ones. Because like in the later entries in the franchise, like people get smashed by glass plates because of pigeons, and then there's all this crazy stuff, and it's like. That's not as scary as like somebody's walking out and getting hit by a bus, because that's very real and it's happened. And if you live in Louisville, we had a horrific accident like that a couple years ago, and it's like that's real. Whereas like how many times does some of this stuff happen? Like somebody tripping on a bar of soap, that happens. Like, I mean, everybody.
Again, it's less flashy, so that's why. You know what I mean? But you can go in a different direction where you can bury in people's minds. But
then when I watch this, it just reminds me of episodes of Family Guy where like they kill Peter Griffin in horrific ways because he like there's a Dick Van Dyke scene they make fun of. He like like he jumps over the couch and he falls on a fork and he stabs himself in the eye. And then he catches himself on fire in the fireplace and then he falls in the oven and it blows up. And it's like that's this movie.
Well, I mean, so like I said, so you have the initial setup and you have like the tension where the different survivors don't believe that it's happening, and like I think one of the more unrealistic things is the classmate. Oh, what was his name? Carter. I'm forgetting what
is he the kind of the asshole?
Yeah, Carter is like the jock jerk,
which they have in every single movie.
He's the one who like doesn't believe it, and it's very confrontational and very difficult. And in real life, I think after you've seen enough people die, you might listen to what they're saying.
Dude, you just watched 7 people die in this exact order that I told you, and they all died, and you just still don't believe it.
Yeah.
And then, so you have like after his girlfriend dies, so you have this setup. And then you find out the Ali Larter character Clear that her father died, and then after her father died, her mother went and got with some guy who didn't like a kid, so they abandoned her. So like that's her character
and now she's
arc.
the quote weird artist in her garage.
And
very 2000.
This statue is like you, unsure of what form it wants to take.
Yeah, it was
like,
very,
come on, that's not why we're here.
It was very much from that late 90s, early 2000s, like She's All That era where you take the attractive person and put them in the not outwardly trying to be attractive clothing, and everyone thinks they're ugly.
And they prettied her up by the end of the film too.
Yeah.
I always get her confused though with the actress that played Alice in Resident Evil, because
Mila Jovovich.
Yes, when I go back and
she looks a little bit like her
because she's in the second one and she's like the survivor. So I always remember that being Mila Jovovich, and I go back and watch this movie and I'm like, damn it, it's not her.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why they just look similar in the movie, or
I think it's their eyes,
or if it's kind of the what's the Sinbad movie that everybody thinks exists but doesn't.
Shazam.
Yeah,
Shazam.
Maybe that's my Shazam thing where I'm like, oh, okay.
Shazam.
And but I always remember it being her because me and my wife were watching it last night. I was like, Mila Jovovich is in this. Where's she's at? And it's not. I'm like, oh, damn, I remember this completely wrong.
Because too, at one point, Ali Larter was in the Resident Evil series.
Oh, she
was Jill, right?
Yeah,
she was Claire.
Claire, yeah.
So there's the connection, but yeah, it just I always remember it being Mila Jovovich. And why I don't know, because she probably would have been maybe too old to be in these movies at that time. But,
yeah, I think she was older a little bit. Maybe, I don't know.
It's just one of those things it's funny how you remember things.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, there's not.
Yeah, so it's you have the element of like she's like the loner. And then the dad, so the Alex character's dad, so he was in the X-Files. He was in the episodes where the guy who could push, like the pusher episodes where he could tell people to do stuff and they would do it. He could tell people to like catch themselves on fire and they would do it and stuff. So that was, so it's funny seeing like somebody that had some bit roles in X-Files. I'm assuming in the episodes that the Glenn Morgan and James Wong wrote, being in the movie, or that they at least had some interaction with. So, like Alex's parents are, like they're supportive, but they're kind of like a non-entity. They're not really in it too much. And then they decide that Alex is, he thinks he knows the order of death. Oh, Sean William Scott gets his head chopped in half with a piece of foil or metal or aluminum or whatever. And that was another kind of like out of nowhere kill. And then the effects for that still look pretty good.
Well,
that was a good sequence. They had the whole drama about who's next. He wouldn't say, the one guy survived because he pulled him out of the car because he saw, and then somebody still ended up dying.
But like that's one of those scenes where like I go back, I can't remember exactly how thick the foil was or aluminum
or metal
sheet. But like there's a lot of times where you go and like it wasn't Mythbusters, it was somebody else that went through and talked about like a lot of deaths in movies and TV shows and stuff where they use like a wire or like a really thin piece or something, and like realistically, like it would just break before it cut somebody in half, or it would bend, or not to say it wouldn't mangle you horrifically, because it probably would, but it wouldn't do what it does in the,
it could have made it stuck like half hour and him like
like that's probably what really would have happened. It would have been horrific injury.
Somebody told me, I didn't believe them. They probably are right, but when I was younger, I used to hang out with these train tracks because some people's houses were on the other side. And sometimes we would like walk along the trestle and we ride our bikes next to the train. Sometimes I was going and these adults laid into me and my friend because they were like, do not ride your bike by the train. That's going so fast it can suck you under. They said apparently somebody they knew they got sucked underneath the train and it cut off their legs and stuff.
I feel like
that, but I was wondering because the way they were showing him walk backwards and they were doing so fast, like he get hit by something like on the train, or get sucked under. Because also working in news, I went to cover a lot of messed up stories, and the thing I always think about when stuff's moving, there was a guy in St. Matthews, worked at the car wash there at those train tracks, and he went to kind of near Drake's. He went to bend over because the workers there, his brother, somebody told him like, hey, if you don't work, they're going to send you home and you'll get all your hours. So go find something to do. So everybody would just go up by the train tracks and pick up like garbage. And he was bent over picking up garbage. And apparently the train went backwards, but it wasn't even going very fast. But it was going fast enough just to hit him right there. And it killed him right there on the spot. Man. So I always think about that stuff too. I think maybe that's when I think about like the weird, simple stuff that kills you. But I was thinking about a lot of things in this scene because of personal life thing. And again, I think that's why this film works is because, again, like Final Destination, Saw is like a specific thing, and Scream has its own like flavor of meta commentary. But this is like shows you that if the concept is strong enough, everything else doesn't have to be that good for it to be successful. At least, you know what I mean? Like, and that's why this.
But see, like that stuff, like in this one at least, where it's more grounded in the sequel, is like I think it works better. And then understanding like sequels, you have to ramp it up. You have to do more. Yeah, the
audience wants to have fun, and you'll have more fun at the theater.
Because like there's one like a roller coaster, and then you said there's a NASCAR race, and then it's just like there's all this ridiculous stuff, and it's like, and then at some point it's just like, how often can you watch just these hapless teens get shredded before you're like, I
think part of the suspense for the movie is you see the characters go into an environment, and you see all the threats and all the things that could happen, and you're just waiting to see what will happen.
Yeah.
And I think it only, like, this movie at least, they have some more recognizable faces that people at the era had seen in other things. So you may have been bringing more affinity to those characters just because of, it's the guy from American Pie.
Well, you care more about that person than you would some,
But I think a lot of times how well the movies fare. So I think you have two things. Do people actually connect with the story and want the characters to survive, and then they're worried about that? Or do people go into it just looking for like a Friday night gross out date movie that they took somebody to and they're 17 and like they just want to see the most gory thing possible?
They walk in absolutely wanting just to see these teens get shredded to pieces. That's why they went to see this film. Whether or not they started to care for them was one thing, but I mean, that's why.
Yeah, people watch this movie the same reason why they play Mortal Kombat.
Well, I think too, though, it may have been though that like the first film in the series is more of the what's this about, and you go into it, and they may have not had that mindset, but the sequels are definitely let's see some elaborate deaths for these annoying kids. Yeah, and there's adults too, because in this movie, like one of the people was a teacher.
But I think one of the things that is the most annoying about this franchise, and just a lot of movies in general, is you always have like the skeptics, and it's like. That's fine when it's like one time, but then when you get into like the 3rd, 4th, 7th, 8th, 20th, 30th person's died, and it's like, are you still just denying this at this point? Or, why don't you just go and fortify yourself in a room and don't leave for a while? And then, I know they kind of do that in this movie too. But it's just like,
Well, and two, the sequels have the added element of they reference this film and other stuff in the sequels. Because the sequel film to this directly references this movie.
Well, because you have a character
and it has Ali Larter's character clear in
Tony Todd in the other ones, right? You said?
I don't think Tony Todd.
He's in, I think he's in more than just the first one.
So for me watching this too, I'm like, these teenagers, that's all they have to worry about. And again, watching this as somebody who's, I don't know, I guess how are you going to be this year, William? 33?
I will be 34.
34? Shit. I guess I'm going to be 34 too then.
I'll be 29.
So I thought I was going to be 33. So I guess that makes sense. Graduated in 2004, 4 years difference. So for me, I was sitting there like, these kids, all they have to worry about is, freak accidents basically. I'm like, as an adult, like, shouldn't they be worried about like a cancer spot on their face? Like, that's what I just got pulled off on me. You know what I mean? Like there's so many other things.
So he was in
which he talks about the rusty nail getting them slowly.
Tony Todd was in Final Destination 2.
Yeah,
I don't think he was.
I wonder if he'll show up back up in the this reboot. I wonder what they'll do for the reboot too. Will they just play it? Like, hey. We thought of a great big elaborate set piece to hang our head on for the trailer, and then a bunch of other good ones. Or do they think about a way to rework it? I guess I'm not expecting them to rework it, but it would be interesting if they figured out a way to really make it fresh, as well as
I think a way to make it fresh would be to take the elaborateness out of it. and then make it smaller, simpler, because sometimes simpler scarier.
Yeah.
And I think to break it down and make it a smaller feel where you said like somebody like just doesn't think about it and they get a nail in their hand, but then it's like a horrific infection. And I think to me that's like scarier. Because like I'm a mechanic and I work on shit.
Yeah,
like that
but I mean, but you need that. But also too, we need that immediate death. We don't. You know what I mean? Like that for me.
It could be like an immediate horrific.
Well,
death,
if somebody has a cut on their leg and they go swimming in the ocean and get a flesh-eating bacteria, that's not. I mean, that's real world, but that's not as cinematic as
but then
somebody.
Again, like, it's that to me makes it work a little bit better because then the person's like, look, see all they're dying, but it's like these are all real ways that people.
I mean, you can think about some horrible things, but I mean. And you think, oh, that's terrible. I mean, that's what this film is still terrible. But something I think about all the time is this little girl, only because I have like a 2-year-old pretty much now. This little girl apparently, I don't know when, not that long ago, a few years back, I guess, was playing in her room by herself. And she had a cape on, like as a superhero, and ended up getting caught, and she strangled and killed herself. Yeah. And her parent, you know what I mean? I think about that, how horrible that is. Like, if they want to go really nasty, like they could set it with adults and children. You know what I mean? Make it. Yeah, like, I'm not saying that's what I want.
No.
But people like this is already bad. Like they could go further with it. Again, this didn't even really appeal to me that much originally, even when I was in high school, because I was like, whatever. So I don't know what they're gonna do. Like they could get really nasty and terrible, and it has its audience, or do they kind of like make it meta? Like I'm really wondering what they'll do if they have a reason to reboot it other than they think there is another audience they can make some money. Did they think of a great idea and sold this pitch of doing a reboot? I'm very curious. Of what that film is going to be.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, I think the one thing with these movies is the only effective thing is it does make you think a lot more about stuff than maybe like a Friday 13th or Chucky or a lot. Child's Play.
And could they use that to good effect? Like again, I think about the girl in the cape all the time, and so we have like a toy we got from Disney World that has a big cat tail, and I'm like, this could easily do the same thing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because she wears it around her neck, and so I at least use that story to think about a million things that could choke her like that. And like more aware, like, I'm gonna watch her on a monitor. She's pretty old, which she's playing by herself in her room. Like,
and this also kind of reminds me of like the Darwin Award books, if y'all remember those.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't, they used to call them the Darwin Awards, and it was just compilations of people's deaths of like who died and what they would say, like I guess idiotic ways. Yeah. Or
I had my own Darwin moment because we had gotten a new wardrobe to put downstairs, but clothes in. And it came in this super huge 130-pound box that was like 6 foot tall, 3 foot or 3 to 4 foot deep or wide. So this huge ass heavy box. And then the delivery people the delivery actually wasn't to get it in your house. It was just to get it to your porch. And they wouldn't help. And it was going to rain that day. I was like, well, man, I don't want to just leave this out here and let it get wet. It's like, well, I'll just work it up the steps myself. So I managed to like work it up to the third step of my driveway, and I was pulling it from behind. So like I was behind the box, pulling it up the stairs. So I was my back to the house. It was facing the driveway, and I got up to the third step, and I'm like, I have lost my footing. And then it was starting to go forward, and I was trying to hold on to it. So it went off and pulled me with it. Oh my! So it falls in the driveway. I bounce off of it into the driveway. And I was like, ugh, my face was hurting, and my stomach was hurting.
I almost asked what incident was it, because I thought you were going to talk about when you sprayed yourself with the wasp spray on the hazard chute in the eyes with no running water around it.
But after the fact, like I was fine and nothing was broken in the box. But then I did manage after that. After I was exhausted and hurt, I managed to then get it inside.
You should have pushed it in your garage.
That was your Avengers moment.
Well, I just wanted to get it inside of me, done with
Julie
it.
Or something.
Well, the thing is, I don't have a dolly, so I was like, this is gonna be much easier with another person helping, and I'll be worried about it falling backwards. Yeah. So the second time, I just had it tilted towards the house. So if anything, it would just fall onto the back of the house.
This is a little bit different, but I have multiple dogs in my house, and the old bed frame we had a headboard and footboard, and now we have king size mattresses, more of a modern type frame on it that doesn't have any of that. Because one night I have a dog named Dixon. She's like a corgi Jack Russell mix, and we heard like all these weird noises, and we didn't really know what it was. And the footboard, my dog had fallen in between the mattress and the footboard because, most beds you have like, a couple inches where you could, and she just shoved herself, somehow fell through it, and I got her head stuck through the railing of the thing. And I'm like, how the hell am I getting her out? Because we're sitting there freaking out, and she'd probably been in it for a little bit. Dogs they freak out, and she'd probably gotten herself in a worse situation. So like me and my wife had to get up and like almost like bend the frame a little bit to get her head out. I'm like, and after that we got rid of that bed like 2-3 days because we left them on the bed when we were gone. Like if we left her when she's gone, we weren't there. Like she would have died.
Yeah, wow.
So like after that we would no longer do any beds with headboards or footboards. We're done with them. He's just like because that freaked us out. The only reason why I even heard it is my other dog barked about it. Because she was off the bed, like, running around the bed making noises. And we heard
She's
Dixie.
like, help.
And we're like getting Dixie out. So it's like, it's just stuff like that he could do in this movie.
There was that kid, was it in Cincinnati or was it local? I think it was in Cincinnati maybe. That he was a high schooler. Again, terrible story, but he was
in the car,
backseat of his car.
Yeah, a Honda Odyssey. He got stuck.
And he even had Siri and was calling for it, but they couldn't figure out where he was at.
I've worked on Honda Odysseys before because I actually came from a Honda dealership. I still do not understand how that happened.
Yeah, again, a freak accident.
Yeah, and then he called the cops. And they came and looked at the car.
They couldn't find the car.
And they found the car. But they looked at it, and I guess when they were looking in it, they didn't see him in there.
Which is so terrible.
And he was on the phone with him, I believe, or right after it happened. And then so it's like stuff like that happens all the time.
Yeah, and could have been saved if they had just busted the window out.
Yeah. But even then you're like having worked on them and like flipped over and worked on you don't even understand how that happened.
That stuff is the sickening stuff. You know what I mean? I don't.
I think in these movies, so the Final Destination films, I think going with more unrealistic, bombastic, over the top situations. One, it gives people an unrealistic outlet just to watch and enjoy it. Because I think if you get too nitty gritty and too realistic, I mean, in this movie, when the guy gets the cord or cable wrapped around his throat in the bathroom, that is like something that probably has happened in some form in real life. Yeah. So that's more like straddling the line of being realistic. But when you have like a freak accident where some piece of metal gets shot and cuts somebody's head clear off, or like in the sequels when a big pane of glass falls and smashes someone, like those things are more outlandish and unrealistic.
Or somebody gets stuck in they're both in tanning beds and something falls and locks them both in. Oh yeah,
I remember that from the trailer.
Like the top thing, and they just explode.
And they burn to death.
Well, I think they like burn to death and then they explode or something.
Yeah, so you have these really, really over-the-top death sequences. But I think in this movie, so this one was the one they all try to get you to care about the characters. I mean, they all have a central character or characters that they try to create like a relationship with and then make you care about. But in this movie, like, there's not a sex scene, there's not any nudity. It was just relying on the gore and the threat of death.
There was a Penthouse magazine.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. He's looking at Penthouse, weirdly juxtaposed against his friend getting killed.
Yeah. But never came back. I thought when his magazine got shredded, he was going to like worry about the pieces because there's porn all throughout his room.
Don't go in my room,
no,
Mom.
It was just like, hey, I was just checking out this porn mag. That shows you what era it was. That also dates the film too. Yeah.
Because in today's world, they have never been looking at a magazine. I guess like very few people would if somebody's I'm retro like that.
If you're underage, the effort to get one is probably not worth it for you at that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because back in the early era, people had to sneak on the internet and it wasn't as prevalent. Now you can anybody has an iPhone, just sit there, iPhone, Android, whatever, can just sit there and look up whatever they want.
So, this reboot's being brought back from writers of Saw. I would assume it would be nastier and grittier and just probably them just figuring out some good set pieces and kind of mainly being maybe the same. I don't know if it's going to be the same sort of, if it's going to be like taking lightly or they're going to try to make it nastier, but it doesn't, you don't seem like they're going to reinvent the wheel probably too much.
Okay, you only watched one of the entries.
Yeah.
Did anything from this entry make you intrigued to watch any of the others?
No.
Now, with that being said, is there anything that makes you interested in the reboot whatsoever?
No, not really. Yeah, unless I see some weird meta concept, you know what I mean? That really flips it on its head, but otherwise, no, I really don't care.
Like this is...
I'm not big into the Saw movies either. I watched the first one and that was it, really. I need to see the sequel.
I was never big into the Saw movies. The Final Destination movies, they were popular when I was younger and I've watched them, but it's like, as a whole, like, they're not movies I care to watch, even if they're on, like, I'll rewatch this one. And like, being that, like, I remember for whatever Mila Djokovic being in it, when she wasn't in there, I was like, I'm not really interested in this. Because I remember I thought she was in it, you know?
Well,
it's like,
these will be better as like 4-minute short films they release on social media. Just an account called Final Destination, and they just show you elaborate kills. Like that's all the value this film
back
has
in that
to
era,
me.
you had the Faces of Death was a thing. Everyone was kind of obsessed
That was even
with.
earlier than that, right?
Yeah, but I remember in high school everyone talking about it back in the early internet era when people were able to get a hold of it. I mean, I think that the concept is cool and is definitely, you know, they wanted to get away from the Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, masked killer mystery thing and have something that, you know, death, you can't stop it. There's nothing you can do. And I think that's also the tone that a lot of the Japanese horror movies took, especially like the American remakes of it's this unstoppable thing. You're just kind of resigned to your fate. Those types of stories became more popular in that era. And like I said, this one being before 9/11 too, they continue to make them after 9/11. Of course, they didn't do the plane again. But I think that type of film, this kind of existential thing you can't stop, because once you've seen 3,000 people die because a few dudes took box cutters on planes, a guy with a knife isn't all that, you know, in the real world in your day-to-day life, outside your house in a mask with a knife, isn't that scary versus this kind of thing you never saw coming that could, you know. So I think a lot of these supernatural movies became more popular because of that, like, shift in era. And then the Saw movies, the kind of post 9/11, you know, when we were waterboarding and torturing people overseas, then that kind of torture porn thing became more in vogue. And especially like the Eli Roth, like Hostel, more of the Americans getting killed abroad type stories. But like the Final Destination movies, they made a number of them. But I do think in the later entries, it was all just about the gore porn. It was all just about seeing the most brutal death you could see. As effects got better and more money got put towards them.
There's like one scene too where like a girl is doing some type of gymnastics and then somebody hits something and a bunch of powder goes up there and she like lands and it just breaks every bone in her body. And it's like you get so outlandish because it's like, I don't know how.
I'm not doing gymnastics, so I'm safe.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know how realistic that'd even be because you can watch the Olympics and people like eat it and then they get it and they're fine. You know, I remember one time watching the X Games, a guy was doing like the half pipe contest, big air or something, and got like 30 foot in the air and fell straight on his feet and like hit the ground so hard and knocked his shoes and he got up and walked off. You know,
well, that's I mean, but it just depends on stuff. But it's just like the movies themselves. So I think what we're saying is, so the filmmaking itself was fine, but the story.
Yeah, I was impressed by the way he kind of worked up some of the tension at times and really, I don't know. I feel like he played with the audience well enough and kind of built up these moments pretty well, actually. That I was like, oh, this is directed with some flair at least.
And I almost think I would have almost preferred to see this as an X-File episode.
Yeah, I think it would have been.
Because I think if you have the grounding of Mulder and Scully involved, who you do care about and you do really have investment in, nothing happening to them.
But culturally and financially, it seems this was the best decision.
Oh yes, because you know they made hundreds of millions of dollars.
But yeah,
from
it
this
could have
franchise.
been turned out to be more satisfying.
But I think the more interesting spin the reboot would probably be somebody from the outside looking in that's not directly attached to it.
I don't know how, because if you have somebody that's inevitably doomed from the start.
But then you never really...
Because a lot of these movies give you the fake happy ending, so you get the ending where everyone survives and they
every
think
single movie.
It's going to be a fourth wall breaking film where we just follow the Grim Reaper and he's just talking to the camera all the time. Like, oh God, these assholes. Well, all right, and he tries to come and they get it. He's like, damn it! And then the next scene is them trying to get it again.
They just shot to his doing the Jim from The Office face. You know?
Well, so this movie did the thing that were actually showed death as kind of like an amorphous cloud of smoke or something. I don't think the sequels did that as much.
Maybe the second one.
It was always in the box art. It felt like.
Yeah,
but I just don't remember seeing that as much in the other ones.
No, I think this and maybe the second did that.
But yeah, so like the series as a whole, like I think that.
And I never realized where the name came from. It's just like, oh, the Final Destination on his luggage. It's just funny that the name, because that's what they tagged it for where his legs are supposed to end up. So it's funny that this whole franchise was based on just the concept of the opening scene of this film. Yeah. Again, there's double meaning with your Final Destination, and I always thought that's what it meant. But it's just funny that it started from that, and then there's 5 films later that got farther away from that, even though it still works. But I never realized that till watching this.
Yeah, I mean, and 2, you do have the element of at some point, unfortunately, death will beat everyone. So, but they don't really embrace that too much.
No, that's what I'm saying. They don't really. There's nothing existential about it, or they kind of dive into the survivor's guilt. But it's very and that's fine. That's what they wanted to sell tickets. They didn't want to.
It was aimed at.
They didn't want to win awards, and they did that.
They wanted to get 17-year-olds on dates, and they wanted to get people to buy it, and then they did, and it succeeded.
Yeah,
but I'm not a 17-year-old on a date, so.
Well, there's like certain movies that even like Nightmare on Elm Street, you could probably delve a little deeper into if you really wanted to. And but that was also a Wes Craven movie, whereas this is not. And like you said, this one's pretty much everything what it is just up front.
Well, like I said, all the movies. So the ending of this film, kind of this amorphous Deus Ex Machina thing. He goes and clears the next one on the list who's supposed to die. But since it skipped the guy Carter, he thinks that if he instead sacrifices himself so that she can live, then that'll cause her to get skipped, and then death won't beat all of them at least. And in doing so, she's able to escape, and he survives. And then it shows them kind of jumps to like them getting on a plane going to France later, and then it's clear Alex and Carter, and then Carter still being a dick for some reason. And then an altercation occurs, and then he gets hit by a sign as the movie ends, so indicating that death is still coming for them.
Yeah. And then she seems to have gotten the gift, or more. She had that feeling before, but now it's almost like now she's seeing the premonition.
And then the sequel kills off the Alex character and just has Clear. But so like those movies all kind of give you the ending where they win, but then it's like, well, no, actually they didn't. And like, I don't know how deflating that is for audiences over time. I mean, if the cast isn't going from movie to movie and it's all kind of one shots with one cast and then they're gone, it's not as big of a deal. But I think it'd be interesting to see what they do with this series when they're aiming it at today's audiences and who have seen more and more intense gore. Because some of the gore you saw in those movies, you have since seen stuff on procedural network shows that is equal to.
Well, like Bones is way worse than
so it'd be interesting to see how they approach that. Like, how can you possibly up the ante more? Like, what would you do? So we'll have to see what they do with that. But in terms of giving this movie a score out of 10, like, where does this land for everybody?
I mean, for me, like a 5. I don't hate it. It's just not my bag, baby. It's just not for me. It's not made for me. I like horror films, but just this flavor of them is not why I like horror films. And I understand if people really enjoy it, but it's like a 5. I don't really care to watch it again, and I don't really care about diving into the rest of the series.
I'm like a 2.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the franchises like I never really cared for. It has I understand that the financial implications make a lot more money making a movie out of it, but I feel like as a concept on a bi-weekly or weekly TV show,
like X-Files or
X-Files or any type of show like that, it would have been more interesting, I think. But then you kind of, when you do 5 movies like this, I know we're only talking about one, but the mythos just becomes like, and I don't know. It's just like, and I always talk about movies that I feel that are like, the deaths are a little, I'm trying to think of the right word here. It's like vindictive, or it's just like mean-spirited. Yeah. And I feel like this one's kind of like that. Then in the sequels, it's like, it's so mean-spirited that it's like, I lose the sense of fun that you would get in these movies.
So maybe the direction they could go with the reboot of the franchise is it's not death killing people. It's someone trying to make it look like they survived an event and them killing people to make everyone else believe it.
Like a Mysterio type event. Like that would be interesting. I just think that like...
So maybe you'll have to cut that out in spoilers because this is...
It's all right. I mean, they've seen comics and different things. So... but I mean, that happens, and that's an event, and it's covered in a lot of different movies, but in TV shows. But I think that would be more interesting spin than what we've been given. Because then if you go back to just the force of nature, it's like, well, I don't know. There's not much.
But there's a lot of things they could do with it. We'll have to see. Like, I think it's like a 5. Like, I think most of the movies are competent. They're all competently directed and stuff, and they have good actors in them.
Was there a Marilyn Manson song in this? Right.
Who was that?
There was a song about Final Destination when he's driving in the car.
Oh, there's a 9 Inch Nails song.
Is that what it is? Okay, because I was honestly half paying attention then, and I was like coming in. I was like, wait, was it okay? That that's something.
So they're all like all the movies are completely made and have like interesting set pieces in them, but don't really hang together to me narratively and get me involved or caring about the characters or anything. And if anything, it's just bringing attachment from liking people in other projects that makes you kind of care for their characters. But in general, they were popcorn movies intended to get a reaction out of teenagers on dates and scare people. And I think they do that effectively enough, but I just don't know that there's really enough there to make me want to go back and rewatch all these other franchise films. Because I remember seeing them when they came out because I was in high school and stuff or college and they were on TV, but I would not go seek these out now.
I feel like the concept is better than the movies.
Execution.
Yeah, because like the concept's cool and, like the Unstoppable Force.
But there's not really a good movie built around it because it is like, okay, it's inevitable, but
yeah,
they don't really, if you start having them talk about the inevitability of death and stuff, then it changes and it's not what this film is supposed to be, so it's also it's a good concept, but it's limiting and it's like
I think It Follows version of like Final Destination might be a little more interesting because it's like you twist on its head,
but I think
like an evolution of that.
But I think you see though that movie made 15 million versus this one made like over 100 worldwide.
But I know, but it's just
it's a better movie.
It's a better movie.
But I think it's just like what are they playing to the?
Why are they remaking this?
Yeah, what's your goal? Is your goal to make
for money?
But then you look at.
With the franchise that has had like $100 million grossing entries in the franchise like worldwide, they're not going to step back from that. They're only going to get there or bigger. Sure. But yeah, so I guess I'll wrap up our discussion of Final Destination. If you're enjoying the podcast, do us a huge favor and leave a review in iTunes or whatever podcast app you're using. We also enjoy seeing comments and stuff on YouTube. And then you can find all the stuff we're doing at houseofvideostore.com. You can find links to all our social media accounts to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. And if you find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Instagram at the William Caps.
You can find me at Caps Derek.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House of Store podcast. Thanks for listening.
At Caps Derek, I thought it was Meta World Derek.
No, I changed it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I ended up changing it because I was like, it's too confusing. I have to do Caps Derek.
All right, clarification.
All right, and we're out.